dust flying under the beds of lawful couples wound in sheets, and daughters smug with semen, eyes in their nipples. Wait! There's been a slaughter here!
Everything exploded in Miami. At a packed concert hall, an inebriated Morrison railed about revolution.
You're all a bunch of f***ing idiots!
Miami was chaos. Audience members brought a lamb up to the stage. Jim took the hat off a cop and threw it into the crowd. It was more of a circus than a concert. Jim started a striptease and asked the audience if they wanted to see his penis. He prowled the stage, feigning masturbation. A brawl broke out. Some of the audience members swear Jim exposed himself. Others said he didn't, that it was all pretend. Confusion, anger, and excitement erupted. It was Morrison's most notorious moment. His dedication to spectacle was triumphant.
We have taken out 2 warrants for Jim Morrison. One of them is for indecent exposure. The other is for the use of obscene languages during his performance at Dinner Key Saturday night.
Morrison turned himself in to the authorities when he got back to L.A. He was charged with a felony. 16 states banned the group from ever appearing again, and in Miami, a conservative group staged a decency rally.
The Doors are out to make their own scene. It was a bad scene, and like I say, it was completely unwarranted.
And I just want to know if anyone has the courage enough to stand up and do something about the trash that's being brought into Miami.
I've heard that the Doors, they got kicked out of other places because of the riots and their indecent exposure and their talking. And I feel that we have to do something about this. This is real disgusting. And how my children, when I grow up and have children, do I want them in an environment like this? I mean, is this progress, or are we decaying in a way?
In the months following Miami, Jim's constant drinking made him look heavy. He wore a thick beard and sunglasses. The counterculture sex symbol was turning into a haunted recluse. Jim was busted for drunk and disorderly conduct in Phoenix after some obnoxious behavior on a plane flight. The charges were dropped when it turned out the stewardess had mistaken one of Jim's rowdy pals for Morrison. Jim's bad reputation was overshadowing the music. As work started on Morrison Hotel, some of the press began calling Jim a has-been. The felony charges were hanging over his head. Jim mumbled to the other Doors that he was having a nervous breakdown. He was 26 years old. In 1970, the Doors were suffering from a critical backlash, and Jim Morrison was facing felony charges for allegedly exposing himself in Miami. The Doors knew they had to make a musical statement strong enough to silence the doubters. Their new record, Morrison Hotel, was a return to stripped-down rock and roll. It avoided cosmic lyrics and jazz chords. Instead, it featured bo-diddly rhythms, blues riffs, and lots of Morrison wailing. The cover photo was shot in the Skid Row Hotel in L.A. The picture on the back was of a raunchy bar room. The message was clear. The Doors were dumping their pretenses. The band was concentrating on down and dirty rock. Some of the group's teeny bopper fans drifted away, but the Doors' hardcore audience liked what they heard. As Morrison Hotel was pushing its way up the charts, a book of Jim's poetry was released. The Lords and the New Creatures contained some of his verse from earlier days. As a Doors live record was released, Morrison dwelled on the pending Miami trial. He had cause to be worried.
Well, in the realm of art and theater, I do think that there should be complete freedom for the artist and performer. I'm not personally that convinced that nudity is always, a necessary part of, a play or a film, but the artist should feel free to use it if he feels like it.
Jim hoped the trial would be seen as a fight over freedom of expression. Instead, it turned into a pop culture carnival, with crowds of teenage fans outside the building. Jim took the stand and said he didn't remember if he had actually exposed himself. He was too drunk to recall. The jury decided he had. Though they let him go on some counts, Morrison was convicted on the charge of indecent exposure. He was sentenced to 6 months of hard labor. His lawyers filed an appeal. Toward the end of the trial, Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin both died from abuse of drugs and booze. Morrison told some pals, "You're drinking with number 3. Jim was depressed. The wear and tear of drinking and the threat of prison wounded his interest in music making. When they went in to make their next record, the Doors weren't very energetic. Their longtime producer, Paul Rothchild, got frustrated and quit. He said that the new tapes sounded like cocktail jazz. Rothschild's departure shook the Doors and forced them to work harder. Along with their engineer, Bruce Botnick, the band produced themselves. They enjoyed the new freedom. The result was L.A. Woman. It was eloquent in its description of apprehension and fear. Riders on the Storm was a dreamy tale of a serial killer that set the mood for the danger that was lurking ahead.
Riders on the Storm.
Late in December of 1970, Morrison cut a spoken word record of poetry. He showed up at the studio with a bottle and some friends. It was his birthday. For hours he acted out his verse. Poetry was his first love. He was thrilled to finally have the opportunity to document it.
Awake. Shake dreams from your hair, my pretty child, my sweet one. Choose the day and choose the sign of your day, the day's divinity. First thing you see.
The Doors went off to Dallas and New Orleans to do shows. The first was fine. The second was awful. Drunk and drowsy, Morrison continuously smashed the mic stand into the stage, mumbling to himself. Densmore walked away from his drum set. The tour was canceled. The Doors were disintegrating. Jim Morrison was burned out and facing jail. The Doors had completed their obligation to Elektra Records. Morrison told his bandmates and friends that he and Pam were going to Paris to be alone. He wanted to spend time reading and writing. He had to get away from the trappings of rock.
I must find a place to hide, a place for me to hide.
L.A. Woman was released, and the song Love Her Madly was a hit. But Jim was enjoying the calm of French Bohemia and the freedom of anonymity. He told friends that, "People think of me as a rock star. I don't want to have anything to do with it." Back in L.A., the Doors rehearsed without him. Even when his life was calm, Jim had to contend with alcoholism. After a couple of months of casual living, he slipped into his manic behavior once again. On July 2nd, 1971, in Paris, he went to see a Robert Mitchum movie and came back home complaining of chest pains. In the middle of that night, Pam found him dead in the bathtub. Only Pam and the doctor who signed the death certificate ever saw Jim Morrison's body. There was no autopsy. That prompted endless speculation. Did Morrison fake his death and disappear to get away from the courts and the spotlight? Did he buy heroin from a French dealer and OD? The rumors were wild and varied. He was already an international star. Death would make Jim Morrison a legend.